to Leaders of Tomorrow Season 10. 10 seasons of empowering you, the entrepreneur. 10 seasons of finding champions and championing your cause. I'm Sunanda Jayasheelan. On the panel tonight, we are talking about the fallout of the Ukraine-Russia crisis on India's small businesses. If you are an entrepreneur in India, what should you be watching for? What's happening globally, even as things change as we speak? And also, what perhaps are some of those areas or sectors that you could be looking at? Let me introduce our panelists. First up, we have Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, Bank of Baroda; Narendra Taneja, leading energy expert; and Prathamesh Mallya, AVP Research, Commodities and Currency, Angel One. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Leaders of Tomorrow Season 10, talking about the events as they're unfolding in Ukraine and in Russia, and the impact it's going to have here on the economy in India, the impact it's going to have as far as oil prices are concerned, and of course, then the big question that we are asking experts like yourself: what is going to be the impact on India's small businesses, and how should they be preparing for a situation in a scenario that's changing and changing rapidly? So who better to ask all of these questions and pose all of these questions to than the three of you? So thank you once again for joining us. Let me start today's conversation by first coming to you, Narendra, and if you can talk to our viewers, let's just kick this off. What, according to you, is going to be the big concern on the domestic economy if things are going to continue the way they are between Ukraine and Russia in the mid to short term? What would you like to point out as going to be the impact on our economy, Fanny?
Well, to be honest, practically everything, because ours is an oil economy.
Yes.
You may have some economists who may disagree with me, but the fact is that ours is an oil economy. Just like look at the global economy, barring a few geographies, the world is actually economy is based on oil still. Yeah. When you look at the share of oil in global energy mix or overall economy, I mean, it's just it's almost central when it comes to the overall health of the global economy and the movements of the global economy. And the same is true also for our economy. In fact, we are even more dependent on oil than many other economies. So, and at the same time, our challenge is that, you know, when you look at the large economies of the world, I'm talking Brazil, China, Indonesia, and others, we are the most vulnerable because our dependence on imported oil is so high, is almost 85%. So it's very large. Of course, it includes oil, crude oil that we import, refine, and then export. But nevertheless, that's part of our economy. Therefore, so our dependence is almost in the region of 85%. So imagine when our dependence is so high. And luckily, our dependence on Russia for crude oil is not that high. We import roughly only 2% of our crude oil from Russia. Yeah. But oil is a global commodity. So our concern is A, the price, and B is, of course, safe movement of cargoes from wherever they are coming. Russia is an extremely bad news for us, because we have seen in practically no time oil prices are now in the region of $130 per barrel. And who knows that they would touch when they touch $150 per barrel and so on and so forth. So you can imagine, is the price that's our worry. It's not so much the physical movement or physical availability of crude oil. We can always source it from other geographies. But our challenge is mainly price and the overall sentiment. So which means when oil prices go up, you know, it impacts practically every single sector across the country and every single individual across the country.
Sure. So I will talk on price. I will talk on Russian oil. I'll come back to those. Madan, to you next. Are we able to sort of peg what is going to be that impact in the mid to short term if things continue the way they are and there's no resolution that's found urgently?
In fact, Sunanda, I think it goes beyond oil. Oil, of course, is the major commodity we're talking of. But what we have seen is that global commodity prices are going to increase, which includes even metals, vegetable oils, and all these are are components of our overall import basket. So the way I look at it as an economist is that we see that there's going to be pressure on a balance of payments as imports go up, the current account deficit increases, the balance of payments deteriorates, and all this is going to get manifested in terms of a weaker currency. That's number one. Second, we'll see that in terms of higher global commodity prices, which translate through both oil as well as other commodities, will lead to higher inflation. We've already seen WPI in the region of around 12 to 13%, CPI close to 6%. So this is going to get exacerbated as we go along, depending upon how long this particular crisis lasts. Next will come the government of India. I think the government's fiscal balances have been drawn on an average oil price of $70 to $75 per barrel. Today, we're talking of something in the region of 120, 130. To my mind, even after the issue gets to resolve, we'll be more likely to be in the region of 80 to 90. So we'll have to see whether you need to cut your excise duties. States need to see if they need to cut VAT. So I think the overall impact is quite comprehensive, whereas the primary impact will be in terms of prices. I think overall growth process, which is just sort of taken off, or we were expecting to go around, say, 7.75 to 8% in 22-23, could get militated in case inflation catches up, interest rates go up, so on and so forth.
Okay. Prathamesh, let me come to you and talk about, some of the other commodities and some of the other areas that will continue facing the impact and are seeing an impact besides oil. Let's talk about metals, let's talk about currency very briefly, just to set the ball rolling as your opening comments. In the mid to short term, what sort of impact are we looking at?
I think in the mid to short term, currency, as far as Indian rupee is concerned, is definitely going to be impacted. I think 80 seems to be there on the cards as far as USD INR pair is concerned. While on the other hand, base metals, since Russia is one of the biggest exporter of metals and producer of metals, I think the production side is going to get impacted, which would definitely create a price premium on all the metals. And in turn, it is going to be a risk side on the supply scenario, which is definitely going to be a price and inherent risk for all the commodities under consideration.
Okay. What's going to happen on inflation, Madan? Maybe I can come to you, but this is open to everyone else. Food inflation, CPI, wholesale. What is really going to happen given the huge impact that we're seeing on oil and the oil prices that we were just discussing?
So we're looking at WPI, we can be looking at something like a 1 percentage point increase in WPI, assuming crude oil prices go up by 10% on a permanent basis. So 130 probably gets moderated back to something in the region of 100, 110. It would still be around 10, 20% higher than what it was last year. In terms of CPI, the influence may be probably less prominent. We may probably have something like 0.5% if I take both direct as well as indirect impact. Because we should remember that even freight rates are going to go up and then the prices will be passed on to the consumers finally. But given the fact that we're talking of other global commodity prices which we are importing, especially edible oils, I think food inflation is something which is going to remain elevated for another year. So I think it's going to be problems not just on oil front, but also in terms of the other commodities, which means generalized inflation. And the fact that a number of companies have already tried to pass on the higher input costs in the last year, in the last quarter of this financial year, that is in the December ending quarter, I think this is going to get, they're definitely going to explode in the coming months.
Okay. Given that we are already skirting that $130 per barrel mark, Narendra, this question is to you, but open to everyone else, of course, in the panel. And we're looking at possible and continuing sanctions and really a ban, if I can call it that, as far as Russian oil is concerned, by the EU, by the US, and by other regions. What is going to happen further? One of you was talking about $150, perhaps. We're looking at it in the short term. How much sooner could you see that? Can we continue depending on just, say, Iran, for instance? What's going to happen if you can't? Things are looking rather uncertain as we speak.
Well, when you look at the picture comprehensively, my sense is that the sanctions, Western sanctions against Russia will continue. Whatever the outcome of Ukraine, even if they sit across the table, find some kind of solution, or if Russia decides to, call it a halt and so on and so forth. But I think West is more or less determined that they want to teach Russia a lesson, quote unquote, not my words. So now in such a situation, the weapon that they have got is basically sanctions. They are not going to fight with Russia militarily. And, so the most powerful, most potent weapon that they can have is sanctions. So my sense is within the next few days, you will find, Western countries imposing sanctions, on oil too and natural gas too. Right now, they're facing some resistance from Germany, Italy, and France. But I think US is quite confident they'll be able to take them on board by organizing, oil from other geographies, particularly the US and Saudi Arabia. So which means that this is going to be a long drawn thing. And when there are long drawn sanctions against Russia, and such, Russia is a very important player in many commodities and in metals and so forth. So, and at the same time, it's very close to some economy, not that close to our economy, but it's very close to integrated with the global economy. So we're going to see the impact of that. As far as, and Russia, Saudi Arabia, their roughly share in global production is about 12.6%. Both Russia and Saudi Arabia almost equal, with the US being about 16% of the total world production. So these are three big boys in the oil space. So if out of these three big boys, if they too fight with each other, impose sanctions or fight militarily, you can imagine the kind of anxiety is going to create for the oil market. Oil market is extremely sensitive to any kind of geopolitical anxiety. And right now, we are seeing the mountain of that anxiety. So I think the market really doesn't know how to respond, and they just press the panic button. But when it comes to oil, it's not only demand and supply. If there is any kind of geopolitical trigger or anxiety, oil has a tendency to start moving only in one direction, and that's north. And that might continue for quite some time to come.
Gentlemen, I have to take a quick break. Back in just a moment. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. And tonight, we are decoding the impact of the Ukraine-Russia crisis on India's small businesses. Prathamesh, are we going to see high pricing, environment as far as oil is concerned? Even if, like Narendra is saying, that there is some resolution which comes about, even if they sit at the table and they come up with some sort of resolution, this regime of high prices is going to stay?
Okay, high oil prices has never been a consistent scenario. It reaches the top and then it is followed by a recession and then a correction. So if you're asking me whether it is a permanent phenomenon, it is no. It is clearly on the basis of risk and the uncertainty that has clearly arisen of the geopolitical conflict between two important countries, which is commodity countries. So take into consideration the overall scenario, if the supply disturbance comes out from Russia, and 10 million barrels is what Russia produces. And even if it is compensated by, say, Iran, or for that matter, Saudi and other countries, still oil market would still remain in deficit. And that is where the risk premium will come in. I think $150 per barrel would like a very much certainty in the near term, and it will come very fast and very soon.
So my question is, for a small business that's watching everything unfold, what should be their strategy? What should their plan? What should be some of the areas that they should be looking at? Madan, maybe I can come to you first and ask you to really speak to our entrepreneurs watching this interview.
No, I think one issue or one challenge which would be coming forward on account of SMEs in the area of foreign trade is the one on payments. Because we have seen that Russia has been virtually pushed out from the SWIFT system, which means that payments which normally take place in euros or dollars will not be possible when you're dealing with Russia. And this in turn means that we need to have this rupee-ruble arrangements restarted. This is something which both the government and the RBI are talking of. And we'll have to see how that exactly works out, because Russia is not a major trading partner in terms of our exports. We had something like $2.5 million which were exported last year, that is 2021. It may be closer to around $3.5 million this year. But at the individual levels, considering the fact that SMEs are major contributors to this export and they deal in small quantities, I think this will be one major concern as far as the SMEs are concerned. The other thing is, of course, that if Russia is moved out of the international market, there's obviously a case of saying that there would be certain opportunities in terms of pushing forward exports. And given the fact that SMEs have a very significant contribution to exports, I think they need to really explore as to which are the areas where they should be trying to push in, because I think there will be a lot of competition coming from other countries and neighboring countries too. But this would be a grand time for one to really consider their options and see as to how you best leverage this adversity which is there. It's a major problem which is there. But in economic terms, it could mean something positive for them.
Narendra, do you have a view as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to comment a bit on green energy. As you said, that you see green energy, of course, for our economy is a very important area. And, climate crisis is real. So therefore, we have no option but to move in the direction of, green energy in big way and as aggressively as possible. And green energy, unlike oil and gas and nuclear power and all that, actually provide huge opportunities to small, medium-sized companies. And you will see, medium-sized companies, even the smaller companies playing a bigger role, especially when it comes to solar. We're going to see, we are already witnessing a massive solar power revolution across the country. We have yet to focus more on, distributed. That's where the opportunities are going to be more for small to medium-sized companies. We are not there yet, but that's very much on the board. And I hope in years to come, we are going to focus a lot more on distributed power in villages, especially in rural areas. But at the same time, let's have no illusion that, we need green energy. But at the same time, green is only going to be in addition to what we already consume in terms of fossil fuels, whether coal or oil and natural gas. Per capita energy consumption in India is still among the lowest. When you look at, for instance, energy poverty in the country, is very widespread. Energy, almost 80% India is energy poor, 80%. So which means that, so people have some energy access to maybe 2 liters of petrol a month, or maybe 2 bulbs and maybe LPG cylinder. But per capita energy consumption comparing with other large economy is still very, very low. So which means, and in democracy, how long you can afford to say that no, you can't have access to that, more energy like people like you and all of us on the panel. So we have to be very, very careful when it comes to the real growth and green energy. That's also capital intensive. For medium-sized company, it can be 2 crore, 4 crore, 10 crores and all that. But again, you need capital and some support from the government in terms of subsidy or policy support, so on and so forth. But that's also not that easy. It's very important that would become easy only when we, as the government, as the Republic of India, we decentralize green energy. Sure. Decentralize completely to the panchayat level, where they can form their own initiative, on policies, on tariffs, and decentralized to that level, which is not happening at the moment. So my sense is that, of course, have this hype. There's a lot of hype around green hydrogen, green energy and so forth. But it's important, if you're a businessman, see through the hype and look at the right opportunity and invest there.
What do you want to call out for our viewers, Prathamesh, in terms of the positive side, really, if I can call it that, of what is unfolding between Russia and Ukraine? As an opportunity or as your advice for small businesses watching today's interview, what would you want to tell them?
India is a commodity dependent country, and we have a good amount of young population. So which means commodity is the need of the hour, the need of the day. So take into consideration this particular perspective and frame. I think all the commodity dependent businesses should be hedged. I think there is clear uncertainty that is seen in the markets. You should not remain unhedged. Hedge your exposure. We are directly dependent on all the commodities, irrespective of whatever event is happening in any part of the globe. We are definitely affected, and hedging is the name of the game as far as commodity exposure business in India is concerned.
Madan, I would love for you to talk about, while it's anybody's guess and it's still too early, for all the students who are coming back, who've been studying abroad, doing, medical courses and are coming back to India, not having completed their courses despite having paid so much money. In terms of the opportunity, if I can call it that, here in India, what do you think and how do you think the landscape is really going to pan out?
I think there has been some indication given by the government that students who are coming back from Ukraine will be accommodated in the domestic colleges. Now, this, of course, is a challenge because there are limited seats which are there, and therefore the move made by the government, or the sounds which have been let out by the government, is very, very positive for these students. And I think that the students will be very willing, and they should take up this opportunity, because one is not quite sure as to when they will be able to go back to Ukraine to complete their education. And even in case the war ends tomorrow, with the kind of property destruction just taking place, the lack of confidence, these kind of institutions aren't going to start operating anytime soon. But one must remember that when one of the motivations for moving out of India is primarily the cost factor.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure how the government will be adjusting for this particular thing. The students have gone to countries like Ukraine and even other ones like Poland and Romania, essentially because the cost of an education, especially in things like medicine, is much lower than what it's in private colleges in India. There are limitations to the government seats which are here. So as far as students are concerned, I think in future, I think when they do consider these kind of opportunities, they would they should definitely be a bit more careful, I would say, when choosing their destination and pick up countries which are generally the more neutral zone so that you don't run into these kind of situations. Because I think what's happened to Ukraine is probably just the beginning. In case Russia is successful in its endeavors out here, who knows what they may do to other countries which were earlier a part of USSR.
Gentlemen, out of time on tonight's show. Thank you so much for watching. For those of you at home, if you have any feedback for us, you can always reach us on those contact details that you see on your screens as we're speaking. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.